Thank you so much, Malcolm. Good evening. It is wonderful to be here with you. Just turn to the person beside you and say, you look absolutely fantastic tonight. You look wonderful. You smell great as well. Great. Well, like I say, I have the absolute honour and privilege of speaking in lots of different places around the UK and further afield. And I have to be, and I know you think I'm just saying this, but I have to be really honest, Northern Ireland is actually my favourite place to come and speak. And I've got to say it's because of the food. And I always go down, it's 2 stone heavier when I go back. But actually it's because of the people. The hospitality is incredible. I've been to Carridaff, I've been to Dundonald, Elim, I've been to other places, and I just absolutely love it. You guys, your hospitality is absolutely fantastic. I live in a place called Chelmsford in Essex, where God lives, and it's about 20 minutes from Stansted. I've got 4 kids, and you know, really busy travelling, but absolutely love what I do. And we're coming back in November on tour. There's a few churches hosting us. If you want to host us, let us know. It should be a lovely time. I always believe in being really real and honest when I speak. Is that okay with anyone here? Are you all right with that? And I'm not going to get into too much trouble. Back in the day when I did a lot of youth work, I used to do school assemblies. Now, I always think school assemblies are probably one of the most challenging things that you can speak at. If you remember your school assembly as being the most riveting, exciting, dynamic moment of your school career, just put your hand up. We must have a few teachers here, surely. And there's a few people there. May God bless you. And but one of my favourite stories from a school assembly was as all the pupils walked in, on the stage was a table. And on the table was a basket of apples. And above the basket of apples was a sign. And the sign said this: take 1 apple only, God is watching. And so the kids come in, they were quite nervous. You know, they took an apple, they sort of had a good look around, and then they went and sat down. And then at the end of the assembly, they went out the back door. Out the back door, there was another table. And on the table was this delicious-looking chocolate brownie. And one of the students had written a note that basically said this: take as much brownie as you want, God's watching the apples. And you know, so often we communicate a God that is mean, a God that couldn't possibly understand. It's interesting, as I go around the country, I ask people one question, is how are you feeling at the moment? And do you know what the most common answer I get is? I'm just tired. I just feel tired. And then they go, I'm not really sure why I feel tired. I put this up on my Facebook the other day. You're very welcome to take pictures of these. Why do I feel tired? Maybe it's the last 2 years. Maybe COVID. Maybe 3 lockdowns. Not seeing my family. Job uncertainty. Government guidelines. War in Europe. 24-hour news cycle. Cancelled holidays. That email you need to answer. Rising gas prices. Cost of living. Lack of human contact. Plus something else I just can't put my finger on. You see, as human beings, we crave certainty, don't we? And actually what the last 3 years has taught us is that we don't always know. We can't control everything. People have had to grieve. You know, my friend said goodbye to her mum on FaceTime. People haven't grieved properly yet, and we're trying to rush through that process. Young people say to me, you know what, we are living through our 3rd once-in-a-lifetime crisis in the last 5 years. There's war in Europe. Do you remember a singer called Roy Castle? Does anyone remember him? Years ago. Roy Castle was an amazing musician, and he sung in pubs and clubs across England and further afield. Roy Castle died of what was called second-hand smoke. He never smoked a cigarette in his life. And you know, there is a thing as second-hand trauma as well, as where we feel quite hopeless and we feel quite helpless, and sometimes watching the news, then we feel guilty about feeling that way because people's lives, we say, are so much harder than us. So where we were at, well, some of us, we've just hardened up, if we're honest. We're scared of revealing our brokenness. We're scared of what other people in church would feel if they really knew what I was going through, what they really knew what I was feeling like. Some people are carrying a lot of anger. You know, it's really interesting. I've never heard a decent sermon on anger. apart from Jesus and the money changers. But actually in Ecclesiastes, it says, don't let anger become a resident, but it can become a visitor. That actually anger is an emotional response to pain. It's showing you there's a blocked goal. They're showing you there's something wrong. And a lot of people are carrying a lot of anger at the moment. Anger against injustice. I'm ashamed to admit that one of the way my anger comes out, and I'm sure this doesn't affect anyone else here at all, is occasionally when I'm driving. I don't know if anyone else can relate to this. This is a good opportunity to poke your husband in the side or your wife, and there's a lot of poking going on. But the other day I was in a traffic and I was really in a rush, and I was behind these lights, and the lights were going from amber to green, and I thought, come on, let's just go. And this woman in front of me was taking such a long time that somehow my hand suddenly appeared from nowhere and beat on the horn. The person looked round, and as she looked round at me, I recognised that the person in front of me was my pastor. I was like, oh no, like that, bent straight down. The anger, sometimes it comes out. We are living in unusual times. Mark Slayer's book, A Non-Anxious Presence, is so helpful at the moment. He says, he quotes someone else saying this: the world is undergoing transformation, a chaotic period where almost anything can happen and nil can be predicted, where yesterday's rule takers become tomorrow's rule makers, but no one follows the rules anymore, where competing global visions collide with each other, where the remnants of the past, the present, and the future coexist simultaneously. It's a confusing time. It's an anxious time. There's huge issues being raised in the last couple of years, of issues around racism, Black Lives Matter, human rights, the environment, the advances in tech. And as I was praying about tonight, I was genuinely praying, God, what do you want me to say? And when I pray that prayer, I get a little bit nervous in case he tells me something that might not be very popular. And I'm like, come on, I'm a traveling speaker. Surely I can just say all my favourite stories. They're like that. And I've never said this talk before, ever, because I really genuinely feel, I've got a hunch, should I say. I get quite frustrated when people say, God says, don't you? Someone came up to me in an interview the other day and said, God's told me that you need to give me a job. I was like, well, God hasn't told me. Can you, go away, please? But the reality is, I've got a hunch. And the three things that I really feel at the moment, and I'm going to explain them, is number one, is think small, don't stay small. Number two is create space. And number three is please start to think differently. And when I say think small, so often I feel like in the church what we do is we crave the big, the spectacular, but sometimes we forget that small makes a significant difference. We measure success by numbers, church attendance, how big is your staff team? And as individuals, what is success? It can't simply be just getting more stuff. I think success is by living by your values, because your values are your priority. It's not just what you do, it's how you do it. Living by our values gives us a great sense of life. We know that Jesus talks about the mustard seed in Matthew 13. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in a field. Though the smallest of seeds, when it grows, it becomes the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so the birds come and perch in its grass, in its branches. The thing is, you start small, something can go really quickly. It suddenly goes viral, doesn't it? It suddenly starts to happen. And tonight, I want to look a little bit at the story of David. I saw things in this story that I've never seen before. This undersized shepherd boy called David. His brothers were seen as the warriors. They were the ones who were going to go and fight the Philistines. And even though David was anointed by Jesse, he continues as a shepherd in the wild places. Goliath is the warrior. He's the killer. He is producing anxiety and fear. And then David is sent by Jesse to his brother. And it's really interesting. Mark Slayer says this, I think this is a good quote. He says, if the ancient context obscures the irony of the scene, let me put it into modern terms. The soon-to-be king of Israel, anointed by God to lead this nation, to build the house of God, is relegated to the role of a skinny Uber Eats kid on the electric scooter. He turns up. And what do the brothers do? They just ridicule him. 1 Samuel 17, verse 28. When Elim, David's older brother, heard him speak with the men, he burned with anger at him and asked, why have you come down here? And with whom did you leave those sheep in the wilderness? I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle. It's really hard when people question the motivation of your heart, isn't it, sometimes? I find that really hard. Now what have I done? Said David. Can't I even speak? And then he turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and then Saul sent for him. David appeared insignificant. And you will know that shepherds were on the margins of society. Their testimony wasn't valid in a court of law. But you know, God always defines strength completely differently to the way that we define it. And when Jesse anointed David, he said, like, man looks on the outside appearance, but God looks at the heart. And I realized that my job isn't to be perfection, isn't to be perfect. My job is to make sure my heart is pure before God. I've got to keep my heart right before God, my motives, changing the world from what can appear an insignificant, a little mustard seed. Paul in the New Testament, he wasn't, a powerful guy in the sense the world. N.T. Wright says, you know what, Paul got beaten up and he got bruised, and in a culture which actually put such a high emphasis on appearance, here comes this bruised apostle turning up village after village after village, town after town, but his secret was his brokenness. In 2 Corinthians 12, verse 10, he talks about we are made of jars of clay. And you know, when they made jars of clay, they used the thinnest material possible so it would crack in the kiln. You know what? It's okay to be broken. It's okay to understand that God will take our brokenness and do something beautiful out of it. I have, over the years, really struggled sometimes with my mental health. And that's not something I often hear speakers say, especially on a stage the size of this. It's normally reserved for a little seminar somewhere. And I still struggle, and to be honest with you. And I didn't say anything because I just felt ashamed. I felt ashamed. I felt like, obviously I wasn't trusting God enough. And I wasn't praying hard enough. And yet it was frightening, really, really frightening. And I felt broken, and I didn't know what to do. And I came across this beautiful image of kintsugi. You get a bowl, you break it, you mend it with super glue, you pretend it's okay. Or if you're honest, we just chuck it away. Or what they do in Japan is they put a gold powder in the glue. So instead of hiding the cracks, they make a feature of the cracks. Arguably, the object becomes more beautiful for being broken. It certainly becomes more unique. And now I've become to the point where I believe that beauty comes out of brokenness, that our scars are not there to be ashamed of. Our scars make us who we are. Jesus, in his resurrected body, has scars. There's going to be scars in heaven, And maybe as the church, instead of pretending we're all okay, we just need to be a little bit more real and authentic at times. Paul says, I do not want you to be ill-informed, brothers, of the hardships that we are going across. So about 4 years ago now, me and my wife, Diane, we started this little charity called Kintsugi Hope. It was just the two of us. I resigned from quite a big charity with a quite a decent-sized staff team. And it's really simple. All we wanted to do was train churches to run well-being groups in their community. Groups that look at things like anger and anxiety and stigma. And we wrote it all in learning styles because what might work well in Northern Ireland might be different to London or Birmingham or Wales. And we were like, right, we're going to just train the church and we're going to just encourage churches to run this in their community. This map shows you where we were working before COVID. And we were really excited. People going, this is brilliant. I can run it in a homeless hostel. I was like, that's a great idea. And someone came up to me and said, you know what, we can run this in a farmer's market because suicide rate amongst farmers is really high. And then people were like, well, we could run this in schools and in prisons and universities. And I thought something really beautiful was starting to happen. And then COVID hit. And I was like, we're completely and utterly doomed. And we're going to have to shut it down. It's an absolute nightmare. But I'm so glad we started a couple of years before COVID and getting it all sorted. And my techie guys, they moved all the training online. And we just put it out there. No marketing budget whatsoever. This is where Kintsugi Hope is working today. Suddenly, it's gone absolutely everywhere. Thousands of people are coming. people come up to me and go, it saved my marriage. People come up to me and goes, I wouldn't be alive today if it wasn't coming to that non-judgmental group who loved me and supported me. Because you know what? Sometimes, guys, if we think small, God does something incredible. If we seek the small, if we seek the person, have we got the wrong definition of success? Sometimes in the church. Second key thing is we need to create space. And I find it fascinating that David, the reason he was so anointed is because he spent so much time in the wilderness with God. He was hungry for the presence of God. In Psalm 23, the famous psalm, the Lord is my shepherd, he makes me lay down in green pastures. You know, sheep are very anxious creatures. If you drive around, you don't see many sheep laying down. They are on edge the whole time. But when the shepherd's there, they can lay down. Even though there's still threats, even though stuff is still happening. And you know, I really believe that we have to create space. And whenever I talk to anyone, we'll go, well, I'm just too busy. I'm like, you said that last time. Yeah, but I'm really busy this time. We have no space for anything. Our lives are too packed. And you know, it's not sustainable. It wasn't sustainable before COVID. And when the first lockdown came, people were actually relieved, you know, for the first month, going, oh my goodness, I'm seeing my kids again. This is fantastic. It's not sustainable. We've got to create space for God to work. One of my heroes in life is a guy called Henry Nouwen. You've probably heard of him. He was a psychologist and a theologian. He spoke at elite universities around the world. He's written 16 books. And he decided, this is what I love about redefining success, he decided that he was going to move from Harvard University to work with social outcasts, those struggling with severe and mental and physical health. And as he arrived to work with them, he suddenly realized, you know what? My CV matters nothing to these guys. They can't read any of my books. All they care about is, do I love them or not? That's what they care about. And then he made this brilliant quote. He said, you know, life is a bit like a wagon wheel. And he said, you know what, you evangelicals, what you often do is you spend your life running around the rim trying to do everything. But what you've got to learn is you've got to live in the hub. This is a great quote. It says, sometimes I think life as a big wagon wheel with many spokes. In the middle is the hub. Often in ministry, it looks like we're running around the rim trying to reach everybody. But God says, start in the hub, live in the hub, and then you'll be connected to all the spokes. You won't have to run so fast. I was leading a retreat, and we were talking about, where do you most naturally sense God? And most people were going, you know, up a mountain, by the sea. And then this young girl went, in the London Underground. I was like, that's a bit weird. And I was like, why'd you say that? And she goes, every morning I get on the tube, I look round, I see different cultures, different ages, different ethnicities, different stories, and I think, God, you're good. You're amazing. Look at all these people. You know, I believe in original sin, but also believe in original goodness. I actually think people are genuinely good and kind. And that my job is to draw the image of God out in people. So what I want to do is wherever I go, I want to see, what is God saying? What's the presence of God doing here? So Henry Nouwen said the secret to ministry is to think about three key things. Number one is solitude. We don't often talk about solitude. Solitude is where we actually realize who we are in God. It's the understanding that you are loved, you're enjoyed, you're liked. Long before anyone rejected you or praised you, you were loved. And it was the Jesus model. He spent so much time alone with his Father in prayer. It's where spiritual ministry begins. And then he says that actually solitude leads to community. And community is actually being with people, but not expecting them to fulfill the needs that only God can fulfill. Community is not an organization, it's a way of living. We are not the rescuer. We've got to get away from this Christian hero mentality that some people have. You know, Samuel Wells talks about the story of the Good Samaritan, and he says it's really interesting. In the West, when you hear the story of the Good Samaritan, we're always the Good Samaritan. We're always the rescuer. He said if you listen to that story in the East, you're always the beggar at the side of the road, and Jesus is the Good Samaritan. Jesus is always the rescuer. Jesus is the one that can help people. Our job is to take people into the presence of Jesus, just like the friends that were taking the paralytic. It's tough sometimes, but we've got to get people. It's Jesus. It's Jesus. Ministry. I love this definition of ministry. Ministry is this: allowing others to experience God within their pain. Henry Nouwen said this: no one escapes being wounded. We're all wounded people, whether physically, emotionally, mentally, or spiritually. The main question is not how can we hide our wounds so we don't have to be embarrassed, but how can we put our woundedness in the service of others? So wounds cease to be a source of shame and become a source of healing. We become wounded healers. We need to create space. We need to create space for doubts and questions. 40% of the Psalms are laments. David questioning, what is going on? Here's a statement for you to get your head round. If you don't lament properly, you will not be able to forgive properly. That is a really biblical part. And churches sometimes, we've become so respectable. Jesus didn't just come for the middle classes, you know that. And people are desperate. They're desperate for honesty and authenticity and vulnerability. It's only when you're truly honest you are actually known. One of the most loneliest places that you can be is in a crowd when you're scared to give your opinion because you're worried that people are going to judge you. That's the most lonely place to be. And sometimes church can be pretty lonely because you're scared to give how you're really feeling in case people judge you. If we define culture as the way we do things around here, then maybe culture needs to shift a little bit. Actually takes courage, doesn't it? Courage and vulnerability are the same thing. Brené Brown, the famous research professor, says the Latin word for courage is cur. It means to speak your mind with your heart, to show up and let your true self be seen. Are we looking at the wrong thing? I love this picture. I mean, it's quite interesting. Of a whale coming up any second now. There it is. They're on a different trajectory. They're looking at different stuff. Are we looking at the right thing? Last thing, we need to think differently. Now, here's another one of those quotes for you to get your head round before you chuck me out. Everyone talks about transformation, but no one actually wants to change. Everyone talks about transformation, but no one wants to change. And the fascinating thing about this story about David, when they persuade him to have a go at Goliath, what does he do? 1 Samuel 17 verse 8, Saul dressed David in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him, a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic and tried walking around because he was not used to them. I can't go in these, he said to Saul, because I'm not used to them. So he took them off. And then he took his staff in his hand. He chose 5 smooth stones from the stream, put them in the pouch of his shepherd's bag, and with a sling in his hand, he approached the Philistine. Mark Slayer says this, and I think it's true. David cannot win his battles with someone else's mantle and with yesterday's tools. We need to adapt. We need to see differently. David saw something different to everyone else. The fear, the anxiety. He grabs the 3 stones. He sees an imbalance in Goliath, and he knows that if he gets it right, there's going to be victory. God tells us to think differently. Gideon, doesn't he? He goes, when he's fighting the Midianites, he goes from 32,000 to 10,000 to 300. It's incredible. And that's why I was so passionate about writing this book. I literally don't want to bounce back. I'm not glad that we've been through what we've been through, but why would I want to go back to my pre-trauma self that's been through and go through all those lessons again? I want to learn what it means to bounce forwards. As a person and as a society, what does it mean to bounce forwards? Thinking differently. In London, where I used to live, we had a huge issue with gang culture. And it was mainly around postcodes, where you live. And if you're in an area and you walk into someone else's area, people sometimes can start on you. And I was really praying one day, and I was thinking, how do I think about this differently? Because when often we do mission, what we do is we get some Christian singers who are amazing, all rappers, and we go to in all the schools and we try and preach the gospel. And then at the end of the week, some people might give their lives to Jesus, and it's lovely when that happens. But I want to go to where the kids are, the hardest to reach young people. Because I think what often happens is that what we try and do in the church, and I get why we do it, is we go for those that are on the fringe, or in education sometimes. I think we go to those who are just below average to bring them up to average, because then we don't have a fail in school anymore. But what about those who are really at the bottom? Who's going to them? So this whole thing differently, I thought, I wonder if we could get a mobile unit somehow and take it on to different estates. So instead of them coming to us, we'll go to them. And then I came across this program on MTV called Pimp My Ride. Has anyone heard of that? So I've got a mate who's a policeman, very high up in the Met. And I was like, would you give me a police riot van? In fact, I bought a police riot van off the Met for £1. And then me and this guy, we went up to MTV and we said, would you pimp a police riot van and turn it into a mobile recording studio and then give it to me? That was my pitch. It cost hundreds of thousands of pounds. And they did. It became the most watched program on MTV that year. It beat the European Music Awards. And it was incredible. And then we started going on to these states. We started engaging with some of the hardest to reach young people. And this was the inside. Look at this. And now we had this really strange, where young people are trying to get away from a police riot van. Now they want to get onto a police riot van. Think differently. There was a young kid in my community. He got shot in his bed. It was a mistaken identity killing. And again, I was thinking, what can we possibly do? Do we get a Christian band in? Do we try and go around all the schools? And I really felt God say, well, let's put the young people on stage. And why don't you try and get all these postcodes together and let them see what they've got in common? And so what I decided to do is to run something called Art Showcase. So I would get all the kids from all the warring postcodes together, and I would ask them to sing, rap, dance, MC, tell us about the needs in your community. And I really struggled to find a venue outside the communities that they lived in. The only venue that I could hire was the Imperial War Museum. So I hired the Imperial War Museum. It was fantastic. They all jumped around the planes in the interval. It was a bit embarrassing. But we were there. And then this young girl gets up and she shouts out. She's doing a monologue. She knew the kid who was killed. She knew him well. And she shouted out, SC15! Stands for Peckham. SW9! Is that why people are dying? A couple of numbers? A couple of letters of the alphabet? I'm sitting on the front row, and I'm thinking, this is awful. I need to get out of here quick. We need to make sure we phone the police. It's all going to kick off. Surely this thinking differently has just not worked out. I want to play you the last 30 seconds of that girl's sketch. Just listen to how the audience react at the end.
You know what's worse? 2-year-old little sister, not even gonna remember what he looks like. Tell her then, did you know you have a brother Jason? Who's that? All you can do is show her pictures. She doesn't even recognize him. Because some fool stepped in my house and shot my brother! You know what's ironic? That we, the youth, each one of us in this room, has the potential to grow up and change this world. So if you're telling me that us, the future, are stabbing each other, going in each other's houses and shooting each other, taking lives like you can give it back, tell me this. What kind of future are we going to be? Thank you.
You know what? If I'd got up and done the same speech, us young people, you have the potential to change this world. They would have gone, yeah, whatever, Patrick, nice one, yeah, great. A 15-year-old girl stands up there and says that that's powerful. Because we need to think differently. And yet, when we're under pressure, what do? We seize control. When I was at Bible college, I did this little study, which I found fascinating, about when the pressure was on, what did the people of Israel do when Moses got up the mountain? They wanted to seize control. Just look at this slide, the difference between the golden calf and the tabernacle. The golden calf, there was no planning, made quickly, people's initiative, immediate accessibility, impersonal object. Aaron commands the gold. The tabernacle, painstaking preparations, lengthy building process, God's initiative, safeguard of divine holiness, personal, active God, a willing offering requested. You see, there's 3 ways of working with people. You do things to people, you could do things for people with the best intentions in the world, or what you do is you work with people. That we humble ourselves. You know the word for humility is the Latin word. It means to come from the earth, to be grounded, to recognize that we're all flawed. Adam Grant says this is a great quote. If knowledge is power, knowing what we don't know is wisdom. Arrogance leaves us blind to our weaknesses. Humility is a reflective lens. It helps us to see them clearly. Confident humility is a collective lens. It enables us to overcome weakness. We need to think differently. We need to think differently about mental health. You know, we did a survey recently with Theos, and 91% of church leaders said they'd never received any training about mental health at Bible college. And actually, our church leaders have done an amazing job during COVID, under so much pressure. And sometimes we expect them to be all things to all people, don't we? And it's really interesting that, who had a BlackBerry? Did anyone have a BlackBerry back in the day? And so the owner of the BlackBerry, they all came up to him, his team, Mike Lazarus, I think his name was. They came up to him and think, I think we need to change. You know, I think we need to rethink about the design. And they started talking about something similar to a smartphone. And he basically went, you know what, we're not changing. Tapping on glass, that will never catch on. What a ridiculous thing. And so they went up to Steve Jobs, his team, and said, I think we need to change what we're doing. And actually, Steve Jobs really liked his iPod. Do you remember the iPods? And he was like, well, maybe we could store music on the phone. And Steve Jobs actually said, I'm not interested. But then his team were clever, because what they said is, you know what? We're not losing our identity. We're just changing our strategy. And that's actually important, isn't it? We're not changing our message. I believe that Jesus Christ is the one and the way. But the strategy sometimes needs to change. Steve Jobs, the reason he was successful is that he changed, he adapted. And actually, over half of Apple's revenue came from the iPhone 4 years later. David saw something different. And you know, there are 3 things I wanted to say. Guys, I think we need to think small sometimes. We need to redefine what success is. 2 is let's create space. Create space for yourself. Create space for others. Create space for people to grow. Create space for authentic, honest relationship within the church and outside the church. You know, the recent survey said that the challenge for the church is many of us don't have any non-Christian friends that we're close to. Maybe we need to think differently. How do we work with people? Let's not pick up yesterday's mantle, but let's look for something fresh. I remember saying to God, God, I'm desperate for a new move of your spirit. But if it's going to come in some big meeting somewhere in the States with some amazing band and some charismatic evangelists, and God TV are going to come and beam it around the world, and we're going to call it revival, I think I might just quit. But you know what? If it could be in small groups, and this was the heart behind Kintsugi, if it could be in small groups, and maybe it can be in brothels and schools and prisons and universities and coffee shops and pubs and in churches and in community centres and in hospitals and within the NHS. And if it's not led by the great and the good and the powerful, but maybe by the fragile, the vulnerable and the courageous, I'm up for seeing a move of God like that. Does anyone agree? Because we need to see God move. I'm getting that some of us are exhausted. Some of us are incredibly lonely as well, because we're scared of actually telling people how we really feel in case they'll judge us. I'll finish with this story, and the band are going to come up. A couple of years ago now, I had a visit to the charity I was running by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. Hope you caught that name as it dropped there. And I was really, really excited because I'd hosted lots of people in the past, lots of politicians, normally a week before the election. And Archbishop Desmond Tutu is one of my heroes. And he was coming at 10 o'clock in the morning. Now, the problem with 10 o'clock in the morning, a lot of the young people that I was working with were either in school or in bed. And so I went round the estate with my youth workers and I said, "You've got to get up, Desmond Tutu's coming." And the young people were like, "Who?" And I was like, "Desmond Tutu, he's really well known." And they're like, "I never heard of him. How old's he?" At that time, he was like 82. And I was getting really desperate, so I said to my youth workers, "Say to them, have they heard of Nelson Mandela?" And they were like, "Yeah, have you heard of Nelson Mandela?" And the young people were like, "Yeah, of course I've heard of Nelson Mandela. He's the next best thing. He's brilliant. He's got bling and everything. You're going to love him." And so in the end, they all got out of bed just to see who this guy Desmond Tutu is, and more out of respect for us than knowing who he was. And he arrived in his taxi, and he was coming with Mary Robinson, the former president of Ireland, but we didn't bother explaining who she was. Not because she's not important, but anyway. Desmond Tutu jumps out of his taxi, and he grabs my hand. And you know when lovely old people grab your hand and sometimes they don't let go? It was one of those moments. So we walked hand in hand right through this day on the bus. And then he sat down and he started to talk to the young people. And he listened as they talked about all the challenges they were facing. And then he grabbed one of their hands and he said, "I'll tell you what you are. You are a VSP, very special person. You're made in the image of God. You have the potential to change this world." And you know, those kids, they didn't suddenly become Christians. They were really transformed. Most of them didn't know who Desmond Tutu was. In fact, at the end, they were like, "Oh, it was really nice of Trevor McDonald to come down and hang out." But there was a moment where we were together. And he turned to me and he said something. And I've said this story a few times. And I remember saying it in front of 5,000 people. And when I told it, I lied. You're thinking, "Oh my goodness, why have we invited this guy to speak at Wondrous?" I said that Desmond Tutu said to me that XLP, which is the charity I run, makes God smile. He didn't say that. I lied. Because it's always about the charity, right? He said, "Patrick, you make God smile." And that's the reality. You make God smile. You're loved. We could be real. We could be honest. You know, Elim, guys, we're family. We're family, right? If we can't be honest with each other, then who can we be honest with? I think God really wants to touch a few people here tonight in a really beautiful way. I'm going to pray. I'm going to worship together. But let me ask you a couple of questions. Who here is feeling pretty exhausted at the moment? Not just tired, but exhausted. Just put your hand up so I can see how many people are, so we can work this out. Would you guys just stand where you are? Just stand where you are. If you're feeling really exhausted, it's okay. The other one, and this is going to be even braver to do, but if you're feeling a bit lonely, you feel like you're on the outside looking in, and sometimes you've got a few doubts and you're scared to share them because you're worried what other people may think. If that's you, could you do something really courageous? Could you stand up where you are right now? Just stand up now. You make God smile. It's okay. It's okay. Holy Spirit, We pray you come right now in this place. These beautiful people, made in the image of God. God, won't you come? Just with your gentle presence, won't you come? When you come. The people are exhausted. They've given so much. They've cried so many tears that no one else has even seen. I thank you that you see. You see. You see. It's okay. Just come now, we pray. And just pour down your love. You make God smile. You make God smile. You make God smile. Not the person standing next to you. Do not worry about them. It's you. It's you. He's looking at you. You make God smile. It's okay. You're loved. You're cared for. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for all the things you've done. Thank you for the effort. And those people who're carrying burdens and they're scared to open up on their brokenness, because what would they think? That sense of being outside of the photo. God, I pray that they would know that they're part of it. They can belong. They don't have to fit in, but they can belong, because that's what you called us to do. I'm not going to rush. If you're sitting next to someone who's standing, why don't you just stand next to them and just put your arm out towards them like this, just so they know they're loved. You don't have to pray at this point. You don't have to come up with anything clever. Just put your arm on them and just pray that they would know they're loved. If you don't know them, that's okay. Holy Spirit, come. Holy Spirit, come. Come with your gentle presence. It's okay. You make God smile. You make God smile. We're hungry for your presence, Lord. We're hungry for your presence. We're fed up with the gimmicks, the hype. We just want you, Jesus. We just want you, Jesus. Father, as we worship, won't your presence fall in this place? Let it release dreams and creativity that would think differently, that would just come before your throne hungry for you. Come, Lord Jesus. Come, Lord Jesus. It's okay.